there's a variety of things. Can I back up one moment?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Last week, we talked quite a bit on Genesis, the 6th chapter, where we had read that these fallen angels had materialized bodies and involved themselves with human women, and that they had had offspring, and they had developed a mutant race, part angelic and part human, and that they had ruled over the earth, and the earth was filled with violence. So it was a very corrupt, evil society. And that's one of the reasons why God sent the flood, was to destroy this mutant race that he had not authorized, part human and part angelic. And the fallen angels dematerialized these human bodies that they had assumed, and now they are spirit beings, but God had trapped them, as it were, in the earth's atmosphere. They were no longer allowed to return to the heavenly courts where they had been created. And so we have fallen angels under the leadership of Satan, the chief of the fallen angels, who have had their past society destroyed, and ever since then, they've been bound in the earth's atmosphere, and they've been trying to reestablish control over the earth and recreate the society that God had destroyed. So what they've been doing ever since is trying to get involved with mankind in a variety of ways in order to, like we were saying, reestablish that civilization or society that they had created prior to Noah's flood.
Okay, so really what you're saying, and we're going to be going into a break in just a minute here, what you're saying, Rick, is that there is a battle going on in the heavens. On the one hand, you have these fallen angels which are hanging around the earth, and on the other hand, you have God and his holy angels, and these fallen angels are absolutely at odds with God and his angels. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
So this is about, Jonathan, this is kind of scary when you think about it.
Oh, it is.
Because it's a battle of spiritual forces. And Sean, why don't we go into a break at this point? This is a battle of spiritual forces over us. And Jonathan, with us this morning, we have Rick Cunningham from Troy, Michigan. He's on the line calling in from Troy. We're on the line calling in from Morris, Connecticut. We got all kinds of things going on. And just before the break, Jonathan, we were talking about this war, this battle that is going on in the spirit realm. And this is something, first of all, spirit beings are far more powerful than human beings.
That's for sure.
And this battle in the spirit realm is over control of the human race.
That's right. And one of the scriptures that Rick read, 2 Peter 2, 4, and 5, that these fallen angels are put into chains of darkness. And he was also saying God is a spirit being and he's in the light.
Right.
So there you can simply see that God has separated the two from each other.
So even though there's this battle going on in the spirit realm, God still has the final say.
And control.
The last word.
You got it.
But nevertheless, the battle rages on in the world in which we live. So, Rick, just before the break, we were beginning to get into the question of how do these spirit beings affect our lives? And you wanted to lay that groundwork of the pre-flood conditions with this super race. As a matter of fact, Rick, as you get into how does this affect our lives, talk just for a couple of minutes about the connections between Greek mythology and a lot of those things that you had mentioned last week, because I think that's an interesting point to bring up.
Well, it is interesting. You know, I call this the greatest conspiracy theory that ever was, and it's the greatest because not only is it worldwide, but it involves these aliens, these spirit beings that have sinned, and they're trying to rule and gain control over mankind, and this has been an age-long battle going on for a millennium. But prior to Noah's flood, the fallen angels who materialized human bodies and their offspring were called giants in the earth. The Hebrew word is Nephilim, and you can read this in Genesis, the 6th chapter. But the underlying thought is that after the flood, Noah and his family that survived through the flood, when they started to repopulate the earth, they told the truth of what had happened in the world that was. But yet over time, those truths become distorted. And many of the false religions of the Greeks and Romans and the Norse, with their various mythologies of gods and goddesses, really are just distortions of the truth of what really went on in the world prior to Noah's flood. These gods and goddesses like Zeus and Athena and Poseidon, Neptune, Thor, these are really talking about things that happened prior to the flood, because these fallen angels and their offsprings, who were giants in the earth, were really, it was legendary.
And what about that? You talked about the myth of Atlantis. Just touch on that, because I think that's fascinating.
Well, that's one that, indeed, there's the fabled city or continent of Atlantis, and it had, as it were, a very advanced society with great inventions and science and knowledge. And it was supposedly just a wonderful world. Yet one day, the continent sank under the ocean waves. It was swallowed up by water and was destroyed, and has never been found since. And so it became fabled, as it were. But we do think there's a reality to that story, and that is that the world, the society of these fallen angels and these giants prior to Noah's flood, that world was probably very advanced because these angels had advanced knowledge. But yet, it too was swallowed over by the water of the flood of Noah's day. So some of these stories linger, and they, like we say, truth is stranger than fiction. And so what we find, though, in today's world, we find that these fallen angels are still trying to reestablish their society in the earth.
And how angry do you think they would be at God for destroying their children?
Well, you know, that's an excellent point, because this was their children, just like you say. These giants, these Nephilim, this was their creation, and God destroyed it. And they are angry, and I've tried to often think of how could I explain to somebody how evil these fallen angels are, and I thought, well, think of your worst Nazi SS guard at a concentration camp, and maybe multiply it by 100, and we're getting close to the evil intention of these fallen angels, and the anger and the malice that they have in their heads.
Okay, now actually that's a good point to bring out, and that brings us. Let's see if we can shift gears a little bit and get more into some practical everyday situations. Because now what you're saying is you've got this battle going on in the heavens. This battle is between spirit beings that are far more powerful than we are. We could call them angels and demons just to clarify who's who and who's on which side. But the part about the demons that is so difficult is that they may be angry and they may want control, but the way they go about taking control in the world in which we live is very subtle. It's very it's hard to figure out that's actually what's going on. Let's talk about the world in which we live, Rick. How is it that these demons affect our daily lives? What do they do?
Well, on that very point, let's read a verse from Ephesians, the 6th chapter, verse 12. Again, it's the Apostle Paul. And he writes it this way: "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against wicked spirits of darkness, and against spiritual wickedness in high places." Well, what is Paul really saying here? He's saying we aren't fighting with human beings. What we're really fighting with is wicked spirits, evil spirits, these fallen angels, and they're in high places. They're in the Earth's atmosphere as a high place, but they're also in positions of power and authority working through people in the earth. And this is the real battle. We don't fight against other humans.